Morning light poured through the glass at Nashville's airport, turning the tiled floor into a patchwork of soft gold. Announcements chimed over the speakers, final calls, pre-boards, zone numbers I couldn't quite track. Wheels whispered and clacked as people steered their suitcases past me, all of them going somewhere with purpose. I stood with my printed itinerary folded in my hand, like it could still become a real ticket if I wished hard enough. Tanya adjusted her designer carry-on and gave me a practiced smile. "We only bought you a one-way ticket. Blake, more flexibility," she said, like she was pointing out a sale sign. Beside her, my son Mark glanced at the floor, then at the boarding gate, as if eye contact were a line he couldn't afford to cross. The words landed without wind-up. No arguments, no long preface. Just a neat sentence, clipped and tidy, deciding my day. I felt my mouth start to shape a question, and then close again. The habit of a lifetime, be agreeable, don't make a scene, rose faster than my pulse. My fingers tightened around the paper until the edges bit into my skin. "Use your phone," Tanya added lightly. "You'll figure it out." I looked down at my hand. Empty. No boarding pass, no suitcase handle. Just the itinerary and the soft tremor of a woman old enough to know that sometimes the plan never included you at all. Overhead, the departures board flipped letters with cheerful indifference. B12 on time. C8 boarding. Somewhere a baby squealed. Somewhere else, a man laughed into his coffee lid. My life had just been edited down to flexibility, and the tiles still shone like nothing had shifted. I tried to inhale without sounding like I was swallowing glass. I thought I started. Mark nodded too quickly. "It's better this way. You can stay longer if you want." His tone made room for me without actually making space. They moved with the tide toward the TSA line. The blue ropes curved like a riverbank, guiding them forward in slow, certain inches. Tanya's bag glided, the tiny wheels hummed. Mark's hand hovered at her back, then fell. I watched the line take them, inch by inch, the way a shoreline receives a wave and then pulls it away with no fuss, no trace. No one looked at me like something terrible had happened. A woman nearby offered a polite smile that slid into something softer when she noticed I held no bag. I managed to lift the corner of my mouth in reply. The speakers announced pre-boarding for families and those who need extra time. I almost laughed. I had all the time in the world, apparently. Shock didn't bring tears. It brought stillness. It carried memories I didn't invite. The first time I learned that quiet could be mistaken for consent. The way I practiced being easy to manage so the room wouldn't ripple. I felt that old practice rise, familiar as breathing. And then I felt something else, like a hinge shifting in its frame. I stepped out of the flow and sat on a bench by the tall windows. My back straightened as if a string had been pulled between my shoulder blades. Outside, a plane pushed back from its gate, slow and deliberate. I set the itinerary on my lap and laid my palm flat on it until the paper warmed beneath my skin. My heart steadied. In the side pocket of my purse was a small, unremarkable envelope, thin, folded twice, tucked away months ago when life still had a different shape. My fingers found it without looking. The edge brushed my knuckles, and something inside me answered. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. It was enough to remember that I had prepared for a day I hoped would never come. Across the hall, the TSA line swallowed them around a bend. Tanya didn't turn. Mark didn't wave. I thought of walking after them, tapping his arm, letting my voice wobble until someone in a vest tried to help. I imagined apologizing for being caught off guard, for needing a moment, for being human. The picture looked small. I set it down. Instead, I watched the departures board roll to the next update. I listened to a family argue gently over snacks. I counted 3 beats in, for beats out, the way Jake used to breathe when he wanted to steady us both. When my hands were still, I slid the envelope deeper into my purse and stood. I wasn't going to chase a door that had already closed. I wasn't going to perform a scene for an audience of rolling suitcases. I had been given flexibility. Fine. I would use it, just not the way they imagined. I smoothed the paper on my lap, folded it once more and walked, not toward their gate, but toward the exit sign glowing a quiet, dependable green. 42 years is a long time to learn the shape of someone else's breathing. With Jake, I knew the tempo of his mornings, the soft clear of his throat before the kettle clicked off, the way he hummed off-key when he buttered toast. We weren't grand, we were steady. We had a grocery list that lived on the fridge, a Friday night deck of cards with a coffee ring in the corner, 100 tiny rituals that fit together like hands folded in church. When he passed, peacefully the doctor said, "A stroke." I thought the house might tip sideways from the sudden quiet. People came with casseroles and compliments about his smile, and then they went back to their Saturdays. I washed the same plate 3 times because I couldn't remember if I'd washed it once. The bedroom felt bigger, the hallway longer. Even the clock seemed louder, as if it had waited until I was alone to brag about how time moves whether you're ready or not. I sat in his chair most afternoons, tracing the worn path his shoulders had left in the fabric, telling myself to stand up and then not standing. Grief, it turns out, is part fog and part paperwork. I signed things I could barely read, answered the phone with a voice that didn't sound like mine, and learned how many ways there are to say "I'm fine" without meaning it. The day of the funeral, the pastor spoke kindly. I remember the pattern on the carpet better than the words. Everyone promised to check in. Most did once. After that, the house and I stared at each other like strangers waiting for the other to blink. A week later, Mark came by with coffee and a timeline. "Mom," he said gently, "you need air." Tanya was thinking we could all go somewhere for spring break. Just a little healing getaway. Everyone's contributing. He said healing the way commercials say limited time offer, like relief could be booked in advance. Tanya sat beside him, warm and polished, nodding. "We'll handle the details," she promised. "You just pack light. We want it to be easy." I wanted easy. I wanted to be included in a plan someone said out loud. I wanted a weekend where my name was on a dinner reservation, and someone asked me whether I preferred the window seat. Belonging, more than beaches or cocktails, was the thing I was hungry for. I said yes before my voice could break. That night, I opened the jewelry box I'd avoided since the funeral and lifted out the band Jake gave me on our 10th anniversary. Nothing extravagant, just real gold and his belief that years deserved a marker. I turned it in my palm until it warmed. Selling it wasn't about money. It was about placing a small bet on a future that wasn't just me and the clock. "We're all pitching in," Tanya had said. I wanted to contribute to the story I hoped we were telling. Family, even if tender at the edges. At the pawn counter, the clerk asked if I was sure. I nodded. Hope can look like surrender from the wrong angle. I walked home lighter, holding a receipt I folded into a square so perfect it felt like a promise. The trip gathered shape in texts and half conversations I couldn't quite catch. When I asked about seats, Tanya smiled. "We'll handle the booking. Don't fuss." When I offered to print the confirmations, "Older habits die slower than husbands," she waved it off. "Everything's on my phone." At the curbside drop-off on the morning we left, I reached for my carry-on, but she slid it smoothly toward the attendant. "We'll check it with ours," she said, already looping a bright priority tag onto her own handle. Mark's suitcase wore the same little strip of status. I told myself not to read into it. Maybe their credit card gave them perks. Maybe this was what easy looked like. At the counter, I asked if I should keep my boarding pass handy. "We'll send it to your phone," Tanya said, tapping her screen. "No need to juggle papers." She took my printed itinerary with a smile that said modern, not dismissive. And I let her because trusting the people you love is one of the oldest habits I own. Still, a small draft moved through me when she said, "We'll check on you after takeoff," like the plan already assumed distance. I noticed other tiny things. The way Mark's answers landed a step to the side of my questions, how the luggage tags multiplied on their handles while my hand held nothing but my purse. None of it felt like an alarm, just static. I stepped past each red flag the way you step over a hairline crack in the sidewalk. Eyes forward, careful not to trip over something you don't want to name. I didn't say yes to Florida. I said yes to the idea that I still had a place at their table. I didn't want sandy beaches. I wanted to hear my name said in a room where it mattered. If buying a slice of the trip helped me buy a little belonging, it felt like a fair price. And if the details were vague, well, sometimes love is a decision you make on purpose, even when the paperwork arrives late. The line at the counter moved quickly until it didn't, until it was my turn and the agent's polite smile held, then flickered. Her fingers tapped the keyboard with the rhythm of someone used to fixing small problems. "Okay, I see you're outbound," she said, tilting the screen slightly. "But there's no return booked under your name." I waited for the rest of the sentence, the part where she found the missing piece, and printed it with a flourish. It didn't come. There must be a mistake, I said, steady as I could. I'm with my son's family, the Monroes. She checked again, slower. I do see a Monroe group on the return, ma'am, she said gently. 6 passengers. You're not listed. It was the kind of kindness that comes with boundaries. Not unfeeling, just final. We can look for a separate return for you, she offered, voice softening. But it would need to be purchased. Purchased. The word slid across the counter and landed in my open palm where a boarding pass should have been. Thank you, I said, because manners are muscle memory. Let me check something. They were by the coffee kiosk, close enough that I could hear the hiss of milk steaming and the paper cup lids clicking into place. I walked toward them with my itinerary held like proof of a story I still wanted to believe. The agent says I don't have a return ticket, I said, careful not to sound like an accusation. Can you check yours? Mark's face did a small, practice thing. Surprise smoothed into reassurance. Right, Mom, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. We thought you might want to stay longer. Get some rest. No rush to come back. Tanya didn't look bothered. It's flexible, she said, as if she were giving me a coupon. You can book your return when you're ready. My bag. I asked softer now. Is it with yours? It's handled, she said, already sliding her phone into her tote. We checked it through. If you decide to stay, we'll get it back to you later. The power in the moment wasn't loud. It was quiet and ordinary. Their suitcases wore priority tags that flashed when the light caught the foil. Their phones held every confirmation. Their shoulders angled toward the TSA ropes that spelled out who belonged in the next line. My hands were empty. I didn't pack to stay longer, I said, as plainly as I could. Tanya's smile didn't move. You've got a phone, she said. Figure it out. She reached for Mark's sleeve. We should get in line. Boarding soon. He gave me a look that meant something like apology if you squinted at it hard enough. It's better this way, he murmured. We'll touch base later. I stood very still while the river of people moved around me, while the blue ropes accepted them and refused me without malice. The realization didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like a ledger line, not just forgotten. Asterisk, asterisk, excluded by design, asterisk, asterisk. The trip had room for my money and my absence at the same time. I stepped aside and found a narrow stretch of wall by the window. The glass threw morning light over everything, honest and unforgiving. I took out my phone, opened the Notes app, and typed one clean sentence. This is the last time I trust them. I stared at it until the words stopped swimming. Then I added a period, because endings deserve punctuation. There were a dozen choices I could have made in that moment. Raise my voice, gather sympathy from strangers, plead for a different outcome. Each option required me to audition for a place that had already been cast. I closed the Notes app and put the phone away. Over the speakers, their flight number chimed. Now boarding group 1. Tanya lifted her chin and walked toward the scanner. Mark followed, still not looking back. The TSA line curved, swallowed them, straightened, and moved on. I watched the departures board flip from boarding to final call, and then to nothing at all. I did not chase. I did not run breathless to the gate or rehearse speeches in my head. I let the plane do what planes do. I let the moment end without me in it. And when the silence around me settled into something like space, I turned away from their gate and toward the part of the terminal where exits and answers live. My footsteps making a sound that felt, for the first time in weeks, like my own. I didn't open the envelope at the bench. I only touched its edge and felt the steadiness rise in me. The way a tide lifts, not crashes. Jake and I had started that little paper lifeboat after his first scare. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet decision to be the kind of people who leave themselves a door marked in case. He'd called it our rainy day fund. I called it the reason my hands stopped shaking. By the curb, the air smelled like jet fuel and fresh coffee. A line of cabs waited in a patience I envied. I slid into the back seat of the first one and gave the driver an address I hadn't said out loud in years. Monroe and Wade, Jefferson Street. The words felt like they belonged to a different version of me, one who planned before she pleaded. The driver merged into traffic. The meter woke with a red blink and began its small arithmetic. Click, click, click. City blocks unspooled. Brick warehouses turned to strip malls, then to tree-edge streets I knew by muscle memory. I set my purse beside me, eased the zipper open, and finally lifted the envelope into the light. Inside, the bills were folded twice, squared to each other in a tidy stack, the way Jake liked things. Almost 1,000, tucked away one cautious afternoon at a time. Beneath the cash lay a white business card with a soft crease down the middle, the name printed in a font that had seemed too fancy when we first received it. J.R. Monroe, attorney. I ran my thumb over the phone number until the ink's impression pressed gently into the pad of my finger. Jake's voice arrived like it always did when I needed a spine. If we're ever cornered, we plan, never panic. He meant hurricanes and busted transmissions and neighbors who didn't keep their dogs on leashes. But he also meant days like this, even if we never said it. The planning had been done in small pieces years ago. The envelope, the card, the way he taught me to write a list when feelings tried to blow me sideways. I took out my phone, opened notes, and beneath "this is the last time I trust them," I added a second line. Call JR. Change beneficiaries. New executor. Asterisk, asterisk, 3 items. Not anger, not theatrics, tasks. The shape of action steadied my breathing faster than any apology could have. We stopped at a red light. In the glass of a storefront, I caught my reflection. A woman with neat hair and a posture I recognized from better days. Not broken, not even cracked, just realigned. The shame that had warmed my face at the counter cooled into something clear. A boundary was being drawn, not with raised voices, but with signatures. The cab's radio murmured an afternoon talk show. The host laughed at something I didn't catch. I tucked the cash back into the envelope, slid the business card into the pocket of my wallet where my driver's license lived, and zipped my purse closed with a sound that felt like a decision. The meter clicked. The city kept rolling past, garage doors, a mural of bluebirds on a brick wall, a woman on a bicycle balancing a bouquet of sunflowers in her basket. I let my eyes rest on the ordinary. Panic always wants to make the world narrow. Planning widens it back out. At the next light, I pictured Jake at our kitchen table, sorting papers into 3 piles. Keep, call, toss. He'd pat the chair across from him and I'd sit. We'd make tea. We'd draw up a plan not because we liked emergencies, but because we liked each other enough to make them smaller. The cab turned onto Jefferson. The building was still there, stone columns, a brass plaque that caught the sun, a door with a beveled glass pane I'd once admired. I felt the smallest lift in my chest, like the first second of an escalator rising. The driver pulled to the curb. That's us, I said. My voice sounded composed, almost businesslike. I paid from the envelope, careful fingers counting bills without apology. Tip included. Planning includes generosity where you can afford it. Want me to wait? He asked. No, I said, meeting his eyes in the rear view. I have a ride from here. On the sidewalk, the late morning had shifted to early afternoon. Shadows were shorter. Somewhere, a wind chime I couldn't see rang twice and stopped. I smoothed the front of my sweater, checked that the card was in my wallet and the envelope was back in my purse, and stood a little taller. Inside, there would be air-conditioned quiet and a receptionist who would ask if I had an appointment. I didn't. I had urgency, a plan, and my name. Calm had replaced the heat in my cheeks. Precision had replaced the tremor in my hands. I reached for the handle, thinking of Jake's line one more time. Asterisk plan, never panic asterisk, and felt the day tilt, gently in my favor. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper, the same way it had years ago when Jake and I signed our first will. The receptionist looked up, and before I could form a sentence, a door opened down the hall. Blake. J.R. Monroe stepped out with reading glasses perched low and that careful smile people wear at funerals and reunions. I was so sorry to hear about Jake. Thank you, I said, shaking his hand. I'm here to make changes. He gestured me into his office, where the blinds threw even stripes across a neat desk. We sat. He waited. I didn't fumble. I want my son and daughter-in-law removed from everything, I said. Completely. No partial designations, no contingencies. I want them out. He didn't ask for the story right away. He just nodded once, like a carpenter measuring what he already knew how to cut. All right, let's review the scope. The house is paid off, I began. There's the small farmland we lease for cattle, nothing fancy, but it produces a modest check. A few investments, mutual funds we tended like a garden, slow and steady, and the savings Jake told me to keep just in case. I pressed my palm flat on the folder in my lap. This is the case. He clicked his pen and opened a thin file labeled with our names. We can draft a full restatement, he said. New beneficiaries, new executor, Updated powers of attorney if you want. To be clear, this isn't about them contesting your wishes. He glanced up. You're resolute? It's not revenge, I said, feeling my voice settle. It's protection and clarity. They showed me who they are in an emergency. I'm matching that with a plan. He wrote that down, asterisk protection and clarity asterisk, as if it were a clause. Who would you like to name instead? I took a breath that felt like opening a window. Elder Haven, I said. The nonprofit that supports older adults who've been financially exploited or left behind. Housing assistance, legal referrals, community programs. If anything I built can make life safer for someone like me, I want that. He leaned back, considering. We'll need their formal name and tax ID. We can set it as the primary beneficiary on the residence, the lease income, and the investment accounts. Do it, I said. And I want a neutral executor, someone outside the family. No conflicts, no backdoors. We can name our firm's trust services or an independent fiduciary, he offered. Fees are modest and transparent. He paused. Blake, I should say this generally. There are state laws that protect older adults from financial exploitation and undue influence. I'm not giving you advice about claims today, but know that the law recognizes what you're describing, at least in broad terms. I'm not here to fight in court, I said. I'm here to make sure they never touch what isn't theirs. He nodded again and began listing items like a metronome. House to Elder Haven. Farmland lease proceeds to Elder Haven. Investment accounts, transfer on death to Elder Haven. Savings, same. Personal effects, specific bequests. Just a few, I said softly. Jake's navy cap to the community room at Willow Grove when I'm gone. Our wedding album to Elder Haven's office. Let it sit on a shelf where someone might see a long marriage and feel less alone. I smiled at how odd that sounded and didn't take it back. Executor, he prompted. Neutral, I repeated. And one more thing. Secure storage for originals, fireproof. A password-protected digital copy sent to an email I'll give you. No one else gets access. If anyone comes asking, I'll confirm, politely, that these are your instructions, he said, and that they were made of your own free will. We moved through signatures and initials, through pages that turned my intentions into ink. The printer hummed, the stapler snapped. Calm precision replaced the heat I'd carried from the terminal. At one point he slid a page across and said, This revokes and supersedes prior instruments. I signed it with a satisfaction that surprised me. When we finished, he stacked the documents into 3 neat piles. Drafts today, final execution tomorrow after I insert the nonprofit's details, he said. We'll notarize in-house. Originals here. Digital copy to you. Executor as discussed. I stood, lighter in a way that had nothing to do with weight. Thank you, JR. He walked me to the door. For what it's worth, he said, clarity is a kindness, even when it's firm. Outside, the afternoon had shifted brighter, the sun catching the brass plaque, so it flashed once like a signal. I tucked the folder against my ribs and felt something I hadn't felt since Jake was alive. The click of a good plan sliding into place. The stakes had moved from feelings to paper, from humiliation to boundaries. Whatever came next, my future had been rewritten by my own hand. The motel room had the soft hum of an old window unit and a bedspread printed with leaves that had forgotten their colors. I locked the door, set the chain, and spread the day across the mattress. Drafts from JR, signature tabs like tiny flags, yellow sticky notes with his tidy arrows, asterisk initial here asterisk, C paragraph, C, revokes prior instruments. I lined everything up until the papers looked less like a storm and more like a map. I read each clause out loud, slow enough for my breath to keep pace. Residence to Elder Haven, farmland lease proceeds, beneficiary Elder Haven, investment accounts, transfer on death to Elder Haven. Savings described on Schedule A. The language was dry and sure. The way a bridge is sure, no flourishes, just a promise to carry you across. I underlined where I wanted my future to step. Every line I approved turned the heat in my chest into something cooler, clearer. On the motel stationery, I wrote the piece that mattered most to me and to a stranger I will never meet. I titled it simply, A Letter for the Woman Who Finds This. Then, in my own hand, You're not invisible. Asterisk, if you're reading this, you might be where I was, standing in a place where the plan never included you. Today, I learned that clarity is a kindness you can give yourself. Choose protection over punishment boundaries over scenes. Make your list. Call the person who will help you put ink to your decisions. You don't have to prove your pain to earn safety. You just have to sign your name. Asterisk. I stopped there not because I ran out of things to say, but because the sentence felt finished. I dated it. I slid the letter into the stack labeled personal effects and added a sticky note for JR. Attached as an exhibit to the will package, store with originals. Security next. I took out my phone and drafted an email to JR. Asterisk, please send scan copies to the new address below. Password protect the PDF. Use the passphrase we discussed. Store originals in your firm's fireproof vault. Confirm neutral executor and contact info. Asterisk, I created a new email account with a name only I would remember, set two-factor authentication, and wrote the recovery code on a card I tucked into my wallet behind my driver's license. Not fear, procedure. Then I opened my bank app. Settings, profile, emergency contacts. Mark's name sat there like a habit. I touched at it and erased it. The field blinked, waiting. I typed just me and saved. The page refreshed. Nothing broke. The quiet in the room changed temperature. I did the same for my credit union, my pharmacy, the utilities. Primary contact, just me. That phrase had sounded lonely once. Tonight it sounded like a key turning cleanly in a lock. On a fresh sheet of paper, I made a small index for tomorrow. 1. Meet JR to execute, notarize. 2. Open a safe deposit box in my name only. Place duplicate copies there. 3. Update beneficiary confirmations in writing with each institution. Keep emailed receipts in a dedicated folder labeled Haven. 4. Buy a simple fireproof pouch for the motel to office carry. 5. Shred anything that tells the wrong story. I gathered the drafts into 3 piles. Asterisk, house, asterisk, land, accounts, and clipped them with the firm's binder clips, each stack topped by my letter and a sticky flag. The envelope of cash went back into my purse, not as a secret, but as a tool. I placed JR's business card on the nightstand and set my phone alarm for morning. Grief had been writing in me for weeks. Long run-on sentences with no punctuation. Tonight, the pages on the bed gave me periods and commas. Ownership returned as grammar, where to pause, what to end, what to begin again. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was choosing my legacy with intention, directing what little we had built to a place where it would hold another woman steady on a day like mine. I stood, stretched, and looked at the bed one more time. Clauses, signatures, sticky notes like small, bright lighthouses. My life wasn't smaller than it had been this morning. It was specific. I turned off the lamp and left the bathroom light on. The door cracked, just enough glow to say you're safe. Before I lay down, I whispered to the dark, authorship, tasting the word. Not widowhood, not aftermath. Authorship. Then I slept, and for the first time since the funeral, I didn't dream of doors closing. I dreamed of a pen in my hand. I chose a Tuesday because Tuesdays don't ask for attention. Midweek, mid-morning, the kind of hour when most people are at work and the neighborhood keeps its head down. The moving company came from 2 counties over, recommended by JR's receptionist, small crew. Cash discount, no reason to chat at the grocery store later. When I called to book them, the dispatcher asked full house. No, I said. Just what matters. The truck idled at the curb. A low, steady hum. The foreman, kind eyes, careful hands, walked the rooms with me, clipboard tucked to his side. We'll pad the chair extra, he said, nodding toward the spot by the window where Jake's back had shaped the cushion into a quiet invitation. He didn't ask why I only wanted 1 chair. He didn't ask about the sofa or the dining table where we had laughed ourselves out of breath the night the roast fell apart and we ate it with spoons. He just signaled to his team, and they moved like people who understand that some jobs need to leave no footprints. Sunlight laid clean rectangles on the floors, as if the house had been cut into pages. Dust lifted and settled in that slow ballet. It does when doors open and men pass with canvas straps over their shoulders. I had already packed the small things that counted. The wedding album with its heavy cover and fingerprints of 100 happy touches, 1 box of books, spines soft from rereading, a quilt my mother stitched with uneven stars, and Jake's navy cap. The cap had a crease in the brim where his thumb always pressed it into shape. I set it in a shallow box padded with tissue and wrote CAP front seat on the lid. I left the dishes where they were. I left the guest room with its framed print of a lighthouse and the closet full of coats that remembered shoulders I didn't anymore. I ran a cloth along the kitchen counters. not to clean for someone else, but to mark that I had finished here. The wind chimes Jake had hung under the eve chime twice. Soft notes, like they were clearing their throat to speak, and then thinking better of it. We took the chair last. The foreman and one of the crew slipped a quilted sleeve over it like a winter coat, securing it with a wide blue strap. "You want to walk it out?" he asked. I smiled at the courtesy and shook my head. I stood to the side instead and watched it pass through the doorway it had watched me pass through 1,000 times. The house looked bigger without it, and also a little more honest. I kept my phone in my pocket. No photos, no timestamps. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't want to turn the leaving into a souvenir. In the hallway, I paused where the paint had a faint scuff from years of Jake's shoulder grazing the corner when he carried in groceries 2 bags at a time. My hand went to the spot-on reflex and rested there. "Thank you," I said, not expecting an answer. When the last box was settled and the back of the truck slid shut with that rubber lip thump, I walked the rooms one more time. The bedroom, sun on the edge of the bedspread I wasn't taking. The living room, floor finally free of the rug that hid a scratch we once blamed on the dog we never had. The kitchen, window over the sink throwing light onto the faucet like a blessing. I listened for something to rise up in me, rage, sorrow, second thoughts, and found only a loosened knot. On the counter, I laid a plain envelope with 2 keys inside. I had written the note the night before, simple and final. Don't call. I am where I want to be. Asterisk, asterisk, no names, no return address, no performance. Just a boundary you could slide a key across. At the door, the wind chimes counted me out. I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door gently, the latch clicking home, the kind of sound that lands without echo. The foreman tipped his cap. "Follow us," he asked. "We've got the address." I nodded. The address he had was new, but the plan felt familiar. Travel light, carry meaning. In the passenger seat of my car, I set the box with the cap and the album on my lap, and adjusted the air so it blew cool across my wrists. The movers pulled away. I fell in behind them. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller, then rearranged itself into a simple rectangle the way places do when they stop being yours. No scene, no spectacle, no curtain call. Release is quiet work. At the end of the block, a child's bicycle lay on its side in a square of sun. A dog barked twice and gave up. The wind chimes made one last sound I could not hear from the street. And then I turned the corner, and the street became a new one. And the truck kept its tempo, and I kept mine. Willow Grove announced itself with light. Not the harsh kind that makes you squint, but the soft, honest daylight that pours through wide windows and lands on polished floors like a welcome mat. A piano in the common room played something easy, someone practicing scales between songs, and the air smelled faintly of lemon and freshly brewed coffee. The front desk had a jar of peppermints and a stack of newsletters printed on paper thick enough to mean it. "Mrs. Monroe," the woman at reception said, looking up with real recognition, not the guessing kind. "We've been expecting you. Names remembered. It seems small until you've gone a stretch without hearing your own said kindly." She handed me a key card in a little sleeve with my name written in ink. No sticker, no laminate. I followed her down a hallway where the art was cheerful without being childish. Local landscapes, a watercolor of geese mid-flight. My room, my unit, had a corner window and a view of a courtyard where a stone path braided around a maple tree. The movers placed Jake's chair by the glass and set the box with the quilt and album on the table. It looked simple. It looked enough. At 5 o'clock, someone knocked. Not a staff check-in or a clipboard survey, just a knock and then a smiling face. "We save your seat at dinner for a week," she said. "It's our way." She showed me the dining room. Round tables with cloth napkins folded into little peaks, a chalkboard listing meatloaf, a salmon option, and a vegetable soup someone's grandson had supposedly declared not bad. At one table, a place card read Blake. I took the chair and felt a nudge of something I hadn't had in months, ease. Micro wins arrived like that. In the morning, a maintenance man tapped lightly and asked if I preferred the ceiling fan set to low or medium. In the afternoon, a volunteer came by with a tray of mugs and said, "Coffee? Just because." Not for a meeting, not for a pitch, just because. On my second day, I returned from a walk to find a sticky note on my door in looping handwriting. "Book circle at 3. Join us if you like." Helen asterisk asterisk. Helen is the kind of woman whose wit arrives with a wink, so you know you're safe. If a book doesn't make me laugh or make me mad, it owes me rent, she said by way of introduction. She wore bright earrings and kept score during debates with the golf pencil. Ruth sat beside her, the gentlest set of questions I've ever met. What part felt true to you, she asked. Never, what did you think, as if truth were softer on the tongue. Across from us, a quiet man slid a folded newspaper toward the center of the table. Crossword for after, he murmured. He never gave his name the first week, just offered clues when we got stuck and chuckled when we triumphed over a tricky 7-letter word. We started calling him Mr. Thursday because that's when the puzzle gets interesting. We read short stories first, low commitment, high conversation. Someone cried at a line about a porch light left on and didn't apologize. After the circle, we drifted to the common room where a watercolor class was happening. Brushes lay in cups like flowers. The instructor showed us how to let the water move first, then invite the color to follow. Don't force it, she said, tapping the paper. Let the paper teach you. My first attempt looked like a cloud that had changed its mind, but Helen declared it a dignified bird. We laughed until my face hurt in the good way. On Friday, a bulletin asked for volunteers to start a letter-writing club, pen pals with school children and notes to residents who'd had a rough patch. I wrote my name down before I could make a list of reasons to hesitate. The next week, I led the first session. We talked about stamps that feel like art and sentences that feel like hands. We kept a box of cards on the table and called it the basket of good paper. Mr. Thursday slipped in toward the end, placed a sheet in front of me, and said, "How's your cursive?" It felt like a welcome folded into a joke. By the second week, the 5 o'clock knock felt less like an invitation and more like a ritual. There was always a seat with my name on it. People paused to ask, "What are you working on?" and then waited for the answer. The staff learned I take peppermint tea in the evening and chamomile only when the day has been long. They didn't hover. They noticed. Home, I realized, isn't where you store things. It's where your chair is saved at dinner and your absence is remarked upon with warmth, not guilt. It's where a crossword appears at your elbow and a paintbrush is set near your hand just in case you're brave. It's where your name is said as if it belongs in the sentence. Willow Grove didn't fix the past. It didn't try. It handed me the small tools of a repair. Light, music, names remembered. I used them, and the tearing in me began to mend along new seams. 6 months to the day, the subject line arrived like a small bell rung in a quiet church. Documents delivered. JR's email was one sentence, the kind that wastes no words. As of 9 a.m., all notices have been received and acknowledged. I read it twice, then once more for the satisfaction of the period at the end. Outside my window, the maple in the courtyard had traded its summer green for a deeper shade, like it had decided to keep some things to itself. At 11:07, my phone started to ring. Mark, then again at 11:22. Mark, by noon a third time. I let it vibrate on the table until it turned itself over from the motion, face down, the little pulse of light still finding the seam under its edge. I slid a pen toward me, blue ink, the kind that glides, and turned a blank page in my notebook. Silence, I have learned, is not a weapon. It is a door you can close and lock because the room behind it is where you sleep. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was protecting the part of me that had begun to wake up at Willow Grove. The part that knew my name when someone said it kindly. The part that didn't flinch at the sound of a suitcase rolling away. At 1:03, the phone hummed again. I set my palm on the cover, felt the faint buzz against my skin, and left it there until it stopped. The pen waited, patient. I chose the pen. Dear Blake, I wrote to myself, because sometimes a letter is a mirror you can read. You did exactly what you said you would do. I listed the facts in clean lines the way JR lined up clauses. 1, draft signed. 2, original secured. 3, copies sent. 4, notices mailed. I added a 5th. 5, peace established, not granted. The ink looked steady. My hand did not tremble. The calls began to space themselves out, as if someone on the other end was pacing a room, deciding who they were going to be next. Once, the screen showed an unfamiliar number with the same area code. I let that ring too. Boundaries invite creativity in those who don't like them. That's not a reason to move the fence. At 3 o'clock, Helen tapped on my door and leaned in. Book circle, she said, then spotted the phone. Want me to put that in the bread box? We keep a tin on the shelf for people who need an hour away from their notifications. I'm all right, I said, flipping it gently so the glass faced the table. I'm writing. She nodded like I'd said, I'm breathing, and left me to it. The letters JR sent weren't angry, they were precise. Mine would be, too, if I ever chose to write one. For now, I wrote to the page. I described dinner last night, where the cook had added a ridiculous curl of lemon to the salmon like a party hat, and Mr. Thursday had slid the crossword between us with 3 boxes already filled in. A promise that we'd win. I wrote about the watercolor I'd ruined, and then rescued by calling the muddle a storm at dusk. I wrote about the 5 o'clock knock that had stopped feeling like mercy and started feeling like tradition. The phone thrummed once more and then, finally, surrendered to silence. I placed it on the far corner of the table, screened to wood, and capped my pen. Clarity, I reminded myself, is a kindness even when it is firm. The door in me was locked not out of spite, but because peace needs locks the way houses need hinges. You can open what you've closed, but only when you choose, the handle turns from your side. By late afternoon, the courtyard filled with the soft shuffle of people, taking the long path on purpose. I took my notebook to the window and watched a pair of sparrows argue over a piece of string and then decide to share it. The maple kept its counsel. The sky had the clean, rinsed look of a day that would close without drama. At 5, the gentle knock came. Dinner, a voice said. We saved your seat. I slid the phone into a drawer, not hidden, just patient, and picked up my pen to mark my place in the notebook. When I stood, I touched the drawer as you touch a sleeping child's door. Lightly, grateful, certain. The letters had landed. The calls had come. The door held. I turned toward the hallway where light and names waited, and I chose my table. The email arrived the next morning with a subject line that tried to hold 2 truths at once. I'm sorry, Mom, but at least let us keep the garden. I opened it because I wanted to know which part would be louder, the apology or the request. It began with soft words thinned by speed. Asterisk, we didn't mean to hurt you. We handled things poorly. We thought you'd want more time there. It wasn't abandonment, it was complicated. Asterisk, each sentence reached out a hand and then pulled something back. And then, almost as an afterthought, came the reason for writing. Asterisk, if you won't reconsider everything, at least don't change the deed for the backlot. The garden means a lot to the kids. It's their special place. Asterisk. I read it twice. My pulse stayed even. I placed the laptop on the table and watched steam rise from my mug. Somewhere in the hall, someone laughed, the kind of laugh that's earned, not posed. The request sat between us, old as family and just as tangled. Asterisk, we want the part that looks good in photos. The part that can be pointed to when people ask what we kept alive. Asterisk. They had expected bark, not bite, expected me to bristle and then smooth down, to threaten and then relent. Comfort over care. Performance over presence. I thought about spring break photos of raised beds with captions about mindfulness, about how my name had never made it into those posts. I thought about the afternoon I offered to help weed and was told, we've got it, but you can watch. The truth is, the garden mattered to me too, but not as a backdrop. It mattered because it grew things. Because Jake had once knelt there and brushed soil from his palms like a benediction. Because the land had muscle memory for seasons and patience. I closed my eyes and saw the backlot as it would be in April. Seed packets fanned out like playing cards, string lines marking neat rows, the promise of tomatoes that taste like sunlight. I opened my notebook and wrote a small, unsent reply. Asterisk, I'm glad it meant something to you. It meant something to me too. That's exactly why it deserves a purpose that remembers people who are easy to forget. Asterisk. A week earlier, the regional director from Elderhaven had walked the property with me. She wore soft shoes and carried a clipboard. She didn't look at much. We've dreamed about a therapeutic garden, she said, resting her palm on the fence post. Raised beds tall enough that no one has to choose between dignity and reaching. Shade sails for days when the sun is bossy. A potting table with stools and good light. We'd grow herbs we can dry for tea and marigolds because they make people smile. She looked out over the grass. It could be a place where older hands remember they're still clever. I pictured it then. Seedlings like small green commas, elder women in wide-brimmed hats sliding their fingers into soil that welcomed them back, a volunteer handing out soft gloves and saying, "Take your time." I imagine the quiet conversations that happen when busy work gives permission to say what matters. Growth that remembers. I returned to the email and traced the sentence "at least the garden" with my eyes until the words lost their shape. Entitlement often wears the clothes of tradition. But legacy isn't what you cling to, it's what you set in motion. The land would not be a trophy, a square of earth someone could point to in good weather. It would be a working kindness. I didn't write back. I wrote forward. I drafted a note to Elder Haven instead. Asterisk confirming transfer of the rear lot as designated. Please include plans for accessibility features, community hours, and a bench with a small plaque for those who were told there was no place for them. There is. Asterisk, I added a line about a children's corner with strawberry pots and watering cans small enough for little hands. Let the next generation learn that care is not a performance, it's a practice. Later that afternoon, I walked in Willow Grove's courtyard and pinched the mint leaves we keep in a half barrel by the door. The scent lifted quick and clean. A volunteer knelt by the marigolds, tucking in new soil around the stems. They like to be fussed over, she said, smiling. I thought of the back lot and the letters with their gentle threats of nostalgia, and I chose purpose. Home is where things grow because they're tended, not because they're owned. The garden would stay a garden, only now it would belong to the hands that needed it most. I closed the laptop. I left the apology and request unread a third time. Some beauty blooms only after pruning. I let the day move on. Evening comes softer at Willow Grove, like someone dimming the day with two careful fingers. I cracked the window an inch to let the air in, the kind that smells faintly of cut grass and somebody's good soup down the hall. On the table by the window sits the picture of Jake I always choose when I need the truth. Him mid-laugh, eyes nearly closed, mouth open like joy surprised him, and he let it. He's laughing with his whole face, the way he did when a joke landed late, and twice as funny. I set a small candle beside the frame. Nothing fancy. Just the stubby beeswax I bought from the craft cart because the volunteer said it lasts longer than you think. I struck a match and waited for the tiny flame to catch and steady. The light put a gold edge on his cheek and drew a warm circle on the table between us. It made the room look honest. "Hi, love," I said to the photo. "I'm here." For a long minute, I didn't talk. I listened, to the piano from the common room playing a song I didn't recognize, to footsteps in the hall, to a far-off laugh that rose and settled like a bird. Then I told the truth, out loud so I could hear it land. I'm okay more than okay. It felt bold to say it. Not because my life has grown grand, but because it has become exact. The empty place you left isn't a sinkhole anymore. It's a garden bed where I'm careful with what I plant. There's quiet in it, but not the lonely kind. The kind that makes room for a kettle to boil and a friend to knock at 5 and a pen to move across paper without wobbling. I think you'd like it here, Jake. How the staff learn your tea. How the sun performs every afternoon on the courtyard bricks like a show it never tires of giving. I made the changes, I told him, my eyes on the flicker. All of them. I didn't list the clauses. He hated lists at night. But I said the shape of it, protection and clarity. I said Elder Haven out loud and pictured the raised beds, the soft gloves, the shade sails that will make room for old stories to grow into new ones. I said what I had been holding in a quieter place. They lost their way back the day. They chose convenience over care. Saying it didn't make me bitter. It made me still. Some paths don't circle home, and that's not a failure. It's a map. The flame leaned with the breeze from the window and then righted itself. I remembered him on the porch during summer storms saying, "Watch the trees. They know how to bend." I've been learning. Bending without breaking looks like boundaries. It looks like not answering a call when the call is not an invitation, but a tug. It looks like saving a seat for yourself at a table where you are wanted and leaving the tables where you are not. I promise you this, I said, leaning in as if the picture could hear better at close range. I will honor you with how I live, not just how I remember. I touched the corner of the frame. Dignity, boundaries, community. That's the list. Dignity means I don't audition for love. Boundaries mean my yes means yes and my no means no, signed in pen. Community means I keep the window cracked, the door unlocked at 5, the extra chair by the table just in case someone needs a place to sit and tell me how their day went. I told him about Helen's earrings and Mr. Thursday's habit of leaving 3 letters in a hard clue like breadcrumbs. I told him Ruth's questions feel like warm water. I told him about the watercolor mess I called a storm at dusk, and how everyone clapped anyway. "You'd tease me," I said, smiling. "You'd say a person can't paint a storm indoors." The candle sputtered once, like laughter, then settled. Gratitude has replaced grief the way sunrise replaces night. Slowly enough that you notice the shapes returning, faithfully enough that you stop doubting they will. I'm grateful for the long years we had and for the small systems we built, like that silly envelope of cash that turned into a door when I needed one. I'm grateful for this exact evening, the window open, the soup sent, the note under my door inviting me to Tuesday trivia, like I'm the missing fourth on a great team. I cupped my hands around the candle for a moment, not to hide it, just to feel the little heat. "I'm all right," I said again, softer. "You'd be proud." The wax had made a shallow pool. The wick held its posture. I blew it out, watched the ribbon of smoke curl, and left the window open an inch wider. Night moved in with a courteous step. I set the matchbox back on the table, the photo back into its square of light from the hall, and stood. Tomorrow I'll plant mint cuttings in the half barrel, and I'll remember to bring extra gloves. Some promises are grand. Mine fits in a pocket and looks like showing up. They gave me a name tag on my first Monday. A small oval with Blake etched in a font that looks like it trusts itself. It fastens with a magnet instead of a pin, so it never snags the knit of my cardigans. I didn't wear name tags much before. In the old life, my name arrived when bills did or when someone needed a ride. Here, people say it because I'm in the room. "Morning, Blake." The front desk calls when I pass for my walk. Not ma'am, not sweetie. My name lands, and I catch it. In the dining room, a server I've only met twice asks, "Peppermint today?" and waits for my nod. If my eyes look tired, she brings chamomile instead, sets it down with a soft, "Thought you might need this one." These are not grand gestures, but they are precise. It turns out identity returns by teaspoons. Book circle meets on Wednesdays. We gather around the same battered table that remembers elbows and laughter. We started leaving one chair empty until I arrive. Not as a rule, just as a habit. It's a small thing, a chair shape we noticed. Helen calls the meeting to order with her pencil like a tiny gavel. "Well, Blake," she says when the room goes friendly quiet. They wait, not because I'm right, but because I'm here, and that still surprises me in the good way. I say what the story felt like and where it missed, and Ruth tilts her head and asks me the question behind my words. Mr. Thursday slides the day's crossword over when we're done. 3 squares already filled. "Your turn," he murmurs, as if passing me a baton in a race that never rushes. Ritual makes a spine for the day. I walked the courtyard path twice after breakfast. Once to think, once to stop thinking. I check the mail slot for postcards from the school kids, who call us their ink friends. At 5, the knock comes and I answer even if I'm mid-sentence, because belonging is a practice, not a prize. My name tag goes on before I leave the room. It is not for them. It is for me. When I catch sight of it in the hallway mirror, I see a woman who didn't vanish when her roles did. I return to watercolor with the humility of a beginner and the stubbornness of someone who refuses to apologize for joy. My hand is steadier than it was in month 1, though the brush still trembles when I first touch paper, a nervous bird landing on a thin branch. The instructor says, "Let the water do the work." I try. Colors move with their own opinions, and I am learning to welcome that. Lately I paint birds, messy ones that don't ask permission to fly. Their wings blur at the edges. Their beaks are too sharp. They look a little like escape, and a little like arrival. Helen says she'd hang one if I'd sign it. So I do. My name's small but sure in the corner. The first time I wrote Blake in paint, my hand shook like I was making a promise. Maybe I was. In the letter writing club, I keep a stash of stamps that look like small art. We draft notes to residents who've had a rough week, and thank you cards to volunteers who bring fruit on Tuesdays. I teach a trick Jake loved. Write the last line first so you know what you're headed toward. It works for letters, and it turns out for afternoons. Today my last line is, "Asterisk, you matter to us. See you soon." Asterisk, when we sign our names, I watch people sit up a little taller, as if their own names return the favor. Some things are inherited, a house once, a box of photos, a recipe that never tasted right unless Jake made it. But the best things here are earned. The chair with my name folded at dinner, the tea someone remembers without asking, the opinion people wait to hear. Peace wasn't delivered, we built it, brick by brick, cup by cup, stroke by shaky stroke. It lives in the bread box where we hide our phones during book circle and in the tiny pause before someone says my name like an invitation. In the evening, I set my name tag on the dresser beside the picture of Jake laughing with his whole face. The magnet clicks softly to the back, ready for morning. I breathe in peppermint or chamomile, whichever found me, and look at the day's bird drying on the easel. It doesn't resemble any species a field guide would claim. Good. It's mine. The brush shakes less when I reach to sign the corner. The colors sing anyway. The courtyard at night is a quiet map. Path lights pull into soft circles, and the maple throws a lace of shadow over the stone. I take my cane because it reminds me to move on purpose. The tip clicks lightly, stone, 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 like a patient metronome. From the common room, soft jazz drifts out the cracked window, a piano keeping time with a brush on a snare. Someone laughs once, then hushes, as if even joy knows to use an indoor voice after dusk. I walk the long loop first, the one that passes the herb barrels and the bench where Ruth likes to knit when the heat goes down. Mint and rosemary keep a little of the day's warmth and let it go slowly, the way good memories do. Above me, the windows glow in rows, not surveillance, not spectacle, just quiet proof that people are here, doing ordinary things on the other side of glass. Rinsing cups, folding sweaters, finishing a chapter. Legacy used to mean numbers to me, balances and deeds, the arithmetic of a life summed on a page. Jake and I play by those rules. Save a little, pay the house off, keep a rainy day envelope because storms don't RSVP. Useful, all of it. But as my cane taps the corner where two stones meet, I can feel the definition loosen and refit itself. Legacy isn't dollars, it's the right to write your ending. It's the permission you grant yourself to change the script after the first act, to pick a new set, a new cast, and a better line to close with. I think about the rear lot and the email that wanted to keep it like a souvenir. I think about Elder Haven's plan, raised beds, soft gloves, shade sails, and a plaque that tells the truth. Asterisk for those who were told there was no place for them. There is. Asterisk money will help buy lumber and soil. Memory will grow, what matters there. Hands learning again that they are clever, stories loosening while someone tucks a seed into the right depth of earth. That's the kind of wealth you can hold without needing to lock it up. Halfway around, I pass the dining room. Chairs sit a little askew, the way people leave them when they stand laughing. Earlier, Mr. Thursday folded the crossword and slid it to me with a conspirator's smile. Helen argued with the salmon and won. Ruth poured tea like it was a ceremony. We are not bound by blood and no one keeps receipts. We belong because we show up because at 5 o'clock someone knocks and says your name like an invitation. Chosen family is not pretend. It's presence. Nights like this stitched together until they feel like a blanket. I pause at the far bench and sit. The cane rests across my knees. The path lights edge the stones in pale halos that look almost like page margins. In the old house, I spent too many evenings waiting for a door to open that had already been closed for a while. I told myself patience was love, that endurance was loyalty, that if I stayed agreeable the room would make space. The night air is cooler on my cheeks than I expect, and it makes the next thought land cleanly. I forgive myself for staying too long in rooms where I wasn't wanted. Forgiveness doesn't rewrite what happened. It just gives you your pen back. In the window nearest the piano, I catch the reflection of my name tag on the dresser upstairs. Blake. It's a small oval of proof. I am the author here. Tomorrow morning I will walk this path again, twice. I will take peppermint if the day asks for focus, chamomile if it asks for softness. I will sit at the book table and talk about characters who choose differently the second time. I will sign my name in the corner of a bird that doesn't exist in any guidebook and hang it anyway. The jazz lifts to a gentle run and settles. I rise, the cane tipping me forward just enough to start. Stone, stone, stone. The lights don't hurry me. The night doesn't take attendance. At the door, I look back once and see the garden to be in my mind, seedlings lined like commas, pausing before a sentence that will say something true. Then I go inside, past the bread box where we hide our phones for an hour, up the hallway where my neighbors' names ride the air like a chorus, and into a room that smells faintly of lemon and paint water. Legacy comes with me, not behind me. Presence over proof, memory over money, the ending written in my own hand. Thanks for watching. If this resonated, join us at Grandma Untold Stories. Subscribe to the channel for more true, dignity-first stories about family, boundaries, and choosing yourself. Your support helps us share more voices that deserve to be heard.